Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another exciting episode of Marketing, Mischief, and Mayhem, the show where we talk with great CMOs and VPs of marketing of tech companies to find out what is really happening in the trenches of B2B tech marketing. My name is Russell Quinan. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer of TheorySF in San Francisco. We're a brand and performance marketing agency for tech brands, and we've been having great conversations with our clients and folks in the industry, and we thought we'd just open it up and start inviting some friends to the show to start sharing what's happening in their world, and maybe we can all learn something from it. Really excited today for my guest. Here comes the intro, Jason. Today's guest has a resume so stacked it reads like a Silicon Valley theme park map. From Uber to Cisco to Applied Intuition and now VP of Marketing at Chaos Industries. And yes, that is actually a real name and not a Marvel villain front. Jason Liu has basically mastered the art of bringing order to, well, chaos. He's helped businesses go from spreadsheets to self-driving strategy, scaled products across continents, and somehow made B2B marketing feel almost fun. So buckle up, because if anybody knows how to market in a world that feels like a constant beta test, it's Jason Liu. Welcome to the program, Jason.
Thanks, Russell. Thanks for having me. My first podcast appearance, so excited.
We're so happy to have you, and as always, we're just going to go ahead and jump right in and see where this goes.
Great.
So, Jason, you've gone from building structured product marketing at Cisco and Uber to leading at Chaos Industries. What does chaos mean to you in the context of modern marketing, and how do you harness it instead of getting buried by it?
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned chaos in the context of modern marketing, because I was just at a conference recently and I found myself avoiding the term as much as possible, obviously, because it's the obvious name of the company that I work at right now, and there's just so much wordplay around it. People are making jokes. It's all in good fun, but I personally try to avoid the word as much as possible. But chaos, I think, in terms of modern marketing, really means, I think, that you're doing something in a vacuum or standalone, right? I think, maybe you think one press release will do the job, and you're just like, oh, let's just do a press release. It's all good. That's marketing, right? Or, let's just run some paid ads, reacting to market trends or competitors, just kind of like these one-off things. But honestly, I think marketing in this day and age really just needs to address the entire customer lifecycle, or different points of the customer lifecycle. You leverage different channels. So it's not just like a singular moment in time. And it all starts with understanding your ideal customer profile. Who are you targeting? Then you really just start building together your general marketing organization in terms of brand marketing. Who are we as a company? What are our products? Product marketing. And demand generation. Ultimately, at the end of the day, marketing is to generate demand for your company, for your products. And obviously with all of that, you also just need to understand what are the company level objectives so that your team or the marketing that you do will drive towards the right goals and objectives. And then to have that be successful, you need the right relationships. So all of that really will allow a marketing organization or a team to really do marketing in the right way in this modern day and age. I think all of that kind of combined is really what's needed. And sometimes that's not really understood, especially in these smaller or high growth startups. They just kind of have this like preconception of what marketing is, and it's more one-off for them versus this kind of like whole life cycle of things.
Right. You know what I found on the agency side is I like chaos, especially in our process, but it has to be structured chaos. It can't just be chaos inside of chaos. If there's a framework that contains that chaos, especially when we're in the creative formulation phases, I think there's an energy that comes from that. And it's kind of going every direction, but structured. And I find that really amazing things happen when we get a bunch of creative and strategic people together and start having the back and forth. It can feel pretty chaotic to somebody for the first time, but I find the energy that comes out of that and frankly, the ideas that come out of that are really powerful. So I would call it structured chaos.
For sure.
I think I appreciate. So hey, at Applied Intuition, you marketed autonomy, and they're doing some terrific stuff down there at Applied Intuition, as you know. One of the most technical, future-forward categories on earth. How do you make something so complex emotionally resonant for buyers and investors?
I think something that I pride myself in, I think in your intro of me, you talked through like a lot of different spaces, a lot
It
of
wasn't the
different
Marvel
technologies.
supervillain part, was it?
That's actually what got me. I think it was just like that. I'm ready to join this podcast because that's just the best way to describe it. I wasn't so sure about the theme park analogy,
Okay.
but the Marvel origin story was great. But basically, at every stage, I've had to kind of learn new technologies, and I think fundamentally it starts with that. Right, it's understanding the product as best as possible. I actually just kind of let it consume my daily life too. Actually seeing autonomous vehicles in the wild, knowing how they worked, observing them. What is that spinny thing on top of a Waymo? It's a LiDAR. It creates or takes 3D maps of your surroundings. And by doing that and by diving into technology as much as you can, it just allows you to understand the product better, and that in turn allows you to deliver more emotionally resonant messaging. Similarly, at Applied Intuition, they also built a vehicle platform. So whenever I stepped into my vehicle, just observing like all the different features that are enabled because of this new kind of way of building vehicles. It's no longer an automobile. It's more like a phone on wheels, right? You basically just have a bunch of different apps, a bunch of different connections throughout the electronic wiring. You have a mobile app that can open the doors, turn on the HVAC, all of that, right? But observing it in real life, and actually, aside from Applied Intuition, like even at 5 stars, right? Something so simple from the outside, like a point of sale system, actually is pretty technical on the back end, right? Like all the payment processing that goes into it. It actually helps you understand like why businesses do things in a certain way. Like, why is the local business charging me 3% extra when I use an Amex? Well, it's because they have higher fees, right? So they're trying to cover that. And so my wife sometimes joked with me and is like, wow, you're just always like working. You're always like kind of thinking through like, what things are when we're out. And like when I'm at a restaurant, it's like, oh, what POS are they using? Are they using Square? Are they using Revel? Are they using, Toast? And I think it's just because that helps me in terms of the work that I do and the messaging that I kind of present to buyers. Now, you said buyers and investors. Investors is a completely different audience, right? What they care about maybe is a little bit less on the product itself, but actually more on, okay, what is the growth trajectory of the company? So the messaging there is completely different, where you're probably talking less about the individual products, unless they are truly disruptive and actually contributes to that 10x plus growth that those investors are looking for. But again, it really then just comes down to that audience, right? Understanding the audience, understanding the product, and how that connection plays in, and understanding the pain points of your audience too. That's kind of where that magic happens, and you can then really create messaging that resonates.
Yeah, it's funny. I've been at some agencies where the creative teams were trying to develop messaging and brand campaigns for products they hadn't even tried.
Yeah.
And I would say, hold on, like we're working on an automotive account. And I said, have you even driven this car? And they're like, no, we've just been given catalogs and we've seen pictures. I'm like, oh, get in the car, we're going.
Yeah.
The local, you gotta use the products if you're gonna find that connection point. And you gotta really use the products and experience it if you're gonna do any kind of communication. So I think we're on the same page there. So, hey, when the category you're still in is being defined, let me try that again. I didn't read that right. When the category you're in is still being defined, as with AI and autonomy, how do you set messaging guardrails without killing creativity?
Yeah, I think it's kind of what you mentioned before in terms of a framework, right? I think frameworks and messaging docs are sometimes kind of laughed at just as like too like formulaic, but there's a method behind that madness, right? It kind of allows you again to have those guardrails, just like simple principles to follow, so that when you are doing messaging, at least you follow that kind of principle, and then you apply it to within your brand guidelines or your brand identity. And I think that's really important. So from the messaging side, I've always looked at it as you're trying to convey the voice of the customer to the product team, and you convey the voice of the product to the customer, right? So it's like vice versa. It's like a two-way street. And then you kind of take that relationship, create messaging, but also add that kind of brand flavor, right? I think messaging is good with messaging, but it's very, value proposition, benefits, pain points, kind of very straightforward. But the flavor is added when you then bring in, okay, for example, who is Chaos Industries? What do we bring to the table? What makes the benefits and value proposition different? So you kind of synthesize data from a lot of different sources and allow the creative concepts to really flow. And I think that's when, especially when it's a new category and people are just trying to figure themselves out. We'll probably talk about this later, but it sometimes gets to the point where people are just looking towards other companies in the space because no one really knows what they're doing, right? Everyone's kind of trying to figure out the messaging at the same time. So again, companies that kind of stay true to their brand language, but then follow that kind of like structured framework in terms of the things that we need to hit in terms of messaging. That's when, you don't kill creativity. You still kind of address all of the messaging points that you want, and then you kind of slowly build that category. Category creation is pretty difficult, though. It takes a lot of investment and time. For patience, again, going back to what I mentioned earlier, it's not just like a one-off thing. You have to continuously build that. And some companies actually have attempted it, and it's actually gone wayward just because it's new. It's all new, and we're all trying to figure it out.
It's funny. I've worked in many kinds of agencies, some of the super creative agencies in the world, and some more strategic agencies and some highly creative. And in the very strategic agencies, we go through a painstaking process of building these very complex creative briefs, right?
Yeah.
That the clients wanted to see, 2-pagers, 2.5-pagers of, here's our strategy, here's our key message, here are our supporting messages, that are going to link with our key message. And again, incredibly prescriptive. But then the super creative agencies I've been at, when I presented a brief a format that I learned at a very strategic agency, they're like, no. They're like, you just show us a compass heading. I just want to know we're going north, and don't put all these parameters around these creative teams, because then you're limiting their thinking, right? And you're limiting that chance to get that home run that you never thought of in this strategic document. So it's very interesting from the agency side of how it's even approached. Here's some agencies that have these super tight swim lanes and will only accept a creative given back to us in a concepting session that fits inside perfectly the swim lane. And then there's other ones where you're going to hear ideas that will all get to the compass heading of north, but in different ways. And I found that really interesting. Personally, I like a balance of both.
Of course, yeah. I like letting both teams kind of, flow in their own right. Like there's a reason why, design kind of flows that way. And there is a reason why you have strategy as well.
Yeah.
When both fire on like the same cylinders or the same kind of direction, that's when like the magic really happens, right?
Absolutely. All right, so the Uber lesson. At Uber, you sold trust to businesses in a company famous for disruption. What did you learn about brand rehabilitation and earning back credibility in high growth chaos?
When I saw this question, this is such an interesting one. It was my time at Uber was relatively short, but it was such a formative time for me because my first day was literally the second day of COVID lockdown. Oh. So I go to the office. My manager is like basically nice enough to show up despite this kind of crazy time to set me off on my good way in terms of orientation. No one else in the office. The stock was tanking already by the time I joined. So crazy time to kind of join. But I think because of that, I learned so much at that company. And it wasn't even just in my actual role. It was just observing how leadership dealt with such a trying time for this company specifically, right? This company that built its business on a ride-sharing platform, which basically went away during COVID. So, not only was the company that I was joining rehabilitating its brand, as you mentioned, but it was also recovering from kind of a growth at all costs approach, investing in autonomous vehicles, which they should have, but they were doing it at just kind of such a high clip, no consequences kind of approach. And then to top it off, the cherry on top, a global pandemic that hits the business, right? And so to see how the leadership team and Dara, the CEO, approached it was just a masterclass in how you lead and manage a Fortune 500 business through some very trying times, and that did include earning back credibility from your customers and even from your team members too, right? Because a lot of companies then also went through pretty trying times, like cutting costs and et cetera. So I think they really started with just preaching transparency. And this was really apparent to me even in just the all hands that we did. Sometimes it was just like a very authentic conversation between Dara and the rest of the company. And it was just him sharing his thoughts. I think he even did like stock math once. He was like, I firmly believe that the stock is valued at this price because of this reason. And he just walked us through it. And some of those all hands were just, the most interesting and, again, authentic and transparent. And it kind of just stuck with that, right? So first and foremost, that's how the leadership kind of approached it. And then they obviously, from the business side, stuck to a very pragmatic approach. So ruthless prioritization, cutting back all of the crazy spend, really thinking through what marketing initiatives make the most sense, which business investments make the most sense from the product perspective, and really just having a focused approach. And then finally, just investing in the narrative. Right? I was fortunate enough to join the business to business side of things, help kind of grow that side of it. Obviously, Uber was known as a B2C company, but they recognized that, especially in such trying times, there is this opportunity to start building this part of the business up. Really creating the narrative of Uber becoming these businesses' partners, enabling all these executive assistants, office managers to really have additional superpowers to do their job, especially in such crazy times. So I think a lot of that was also just indicative of how the leadership team at the time kind of approached it and really turned it around. Like by the time I had left, even things were already kind of on the upwards trend. The Uber Eats business was booming and growing. And if you look at them now, like they're just so much better off because of those decisions that they had made. And yeah, there's so much to learn kind of from that experience. So I was really excited to talk about this question and this answer just because, it was so formative.
Sure. What kind of marketing did you do at that point to juice the business? Do you recall what you guys were doing in particular, what your mix was and kind of the messaging you were hitting at that point?
Yeah, so when I was there, I was focused mostly on product marketing. I was also talking to a lot of the other teams on just broader B2C marketing because it is all kind of like interconnected. So we still did kind of the big spends, like the Super Bowl ads and all that stuff. Like that's what Uber marketing has generally been known for a lot of creatives. I think on the business to business side, and this is probably just at the core of my personality, it was a lot of data-driven kind of decisions, optimizing funnels, and because the business that we had worked with was self-serve all the way up to enterprise, right? So there was kind of a gamut of different tactics that you could leverage, whether it's broad scale marketing or very targeted kind of approach. So we did a mix of a lot of different things, whether it was working very closely with the sales team, enabling sales, kind of focusing on a top of funnel website kind of updates, all those things. We also did a bunch of webinars and podcasts, obviously, during the COVID time frame. It was just a weird time, but I think it allowed us to be more creative. We had to pull back a lot of our events budget. I think I was supposed to go to like 2 or 3 events during my time there. It went to 0. Maybe a good thing because I've been to just so many conferences over my career. But yeah, we had to kind of just rethink the playbook and rethink what it meant. A lot of it was also focused then instead of like maybe external messaging, it was actually going back to building the foundation and making sure that we were kind of prepared. So like from a naming perspective or from a branding perspective, how did Uber for Business fit in within broader Uber? Like that's actually a very big conversation to happen. Yeah, and it influences a lot of the decisions that you make, right? Because that association with the Uber brand, how it fits in, how it comes across to your customers. So we actually spend a lot of time on that too, as well. So trying times sometimes just allows you to focus on certain things, and focusing on those certain things will allow you to kind of come out of the gates, better and faster, hopefully when all the trying times are over. So that's kind of how we approach things.
Did you ever do the happy hour from home during COVID? I never did it. Friends get together and they have cocktails together over Zoom. I never did that. Yeah. Did you?
I think a lot of the stuff that we did was hit or miss. Like, some of the happy hours were just like, okay, well, everyone's kind of sitting around.
Yeah, exactly. Just staring at each other.
My day was that I woke up, I worked more, and then I went to sleep.
I get it.
Because there's not much you can do. But some of them were pretty entertaining. Like a lot of the virtual gaming industry that kind of boomed. I think it did its job and it helped us through some crazy times.
That's for sure.
I think some of the activities that happened during COVID were still good.
Okay, well here's the next one for you. In a world obsessed with metrics, and I know you are obsessed with metrics, when do you ignore the dashboard and just go with your instinct?
So yes, I am the first to admit I lean just
You
a lot
never
on
have.
data.
You never
I
have.
lean on data a lot. Always
Okay.
data driven. Always kind of metrics prone. I think I blame that on going to the Tupper School of Business too. They kind of just ingrain that into you, just having that kind of mentality. So I rarely ignore the dashboard and always back my opinions in data. But I would say there are certain decisions, and there are plenty of them within the marketing realm that just rely on kind of a subjective opinion, right? So, for example, just finished launching a video, and for a video, creating the soundtrack, that's like one of the most subjective things. And it's just everyone will have their own opinion because they always have their own thoughts of what good music is and how it matches with what you're trying to portray. And so for those, you just have to go with your gut. You just have to go with what makes the most sense. You should probably still try to get some data in terms of like, okay, let's get like a more diverse kind of set of opinions on the soundtrack, and maybe kind of do like a majority rules type thing. Even then, you might still want to just go with your gut and what makes the most sense. So there are decisions like that, I think, in the marketing business realm. And I think as I was thinking through this question too, I think one thing, and going back to kind of like my career, I think career decisions in marketing, and maybe beyond marketing too, are largely instinctive too, right? You have the data that you can have, but especially with high growth startups, a lot of it is just based on, okay, do you think this startup will do well? And a lot of that is kind of a gut feeling too, right? A gut feeling on the industry, where it's going, the company's trajectory, your gut feeling on the leadership team that is already there. A lot of those inputs are things that you just won't have the data, and you will have to make that kind of just gut instinct and go with that. And so I think then it's usually you just use kind of the North Star of, okay, just focus on like a product that you're passionate about, and then go to that company. Or as Uber, the business is kind of turning around, it's in a very kind of chaotic state. Is it something that I'd want to do? And so at every kind of point in my career, there have been those like sometimes pretty impactful decisions to be made. And those are all mostly gut instinct at the end of the day. Even though it, I still had a Google sheet. I still had a weighted average of all the different details that input my decision. And sometimes you still make decisions that go against the data just because your gut tells you differently. So there have been cases where all the data kind of pointed towards me going somewhere specifically, and I just made the gut feeling to go somewhere else.
I'll tell you, at least on the creative side, and I've had to share this with clients, there's been some clients that I've had over my career where they wanted to almost dictate the creative. And, I've been fortunate to work with some of the best creatives in the world. And I had to tell them, like, no, you don't want to dictate creative. And my favorite quote was, there was no committee behind Michelangelo. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And sometimes you got to let the folks who are just truly exceptional at this do what they do, and don't put the handcuffs on them. And that's what you're here for, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, next question. Moving from marketing execution to leading strategy changes everything, right? What was your hardest leadership pivot, and what did you have to unlearn?
Yeah, so this is a pretty recent change. I think the biggest change was honestly like the balance between creating work to do and like actually doing the work. I think at a high growth startup, it is blended a little bit more. Like you have to create work and you do work, even in leadership, just because that's the nature of things. And I think at high growth startups too, I found that actually being in the trenches with your team and doing the work actually does set a good example, or it sets the pace. It gives a good example for how a team member should kind of function. And so at some point though, I think as a leader, your focus does need to be a little bit more on enabling the team to be the best that it could be. Sure, part of it can still be doing some of the work, but whereas I used to always adopt that kind of just head first type of mentality, go do it, get it done, and that has served well, especially at smaller companies, and maybe that's why I left bigger companies too as well, just to get that kind of feeling and that attitude of everyone doing that similarly. I think it is stepping back a little bit from that and thinking through, okay, who do I actually think is the best suited to take this project on? Who would grow the most by taking this project on, and what impact would they have on the company, and what does that mean for their career trajectory? How do I best support that team member? it's not really an unlearning because I kind of already knew that, and especially as like a mentor just of team members generally, I think that was already the attitude that I had adopted. But I think it's just actively reminding myself, like, instead of just like diving in doing it, there's a team, and there's a reason why you're hiring the best of the best, and sometimes you hire people who are even better than you at that specific function, and there's a reason for it. And so you just have to kind of trust that, let your team kind of grow, take the reins, and still be there to be involved and to guide. Just towing that balance, I think, was unique. But luckily for me, still plenty to do. So I think I'm not going to fully step away ever. I think that's still just part of the fun too, and it also helps me understand kind of like just what's going on.
It's funny, that's been a really hard lesson for me, is backing off and letting team members do some of those roles, because I like doing it. I think it's fun. And that's why I'm still in this industry. I love to roll up my sleeves and get dirty. And that's been one of the hardest things for me, I know for sure.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's talk about brand in a technical world.
Sure.
So Chaos Industries builds next-gen tech, hands down. How do you build a brand that feels human when your product sounds like science fiction?
Yeah, I think we alluded to this a little bit when we talked about kind of just first understanding the products, right? I think it all comes down to that at the end of the day. No matter how technical, no matter how science fiction things might sound, the easiest way is just understand it, distill it, and use regular people speak or language to write out what it means or what it does.
Yep.
And oftentimes that's actually the best way to just approach it. In certain mediums, obviously, if you're appealing to a more technical audience or developer audience, you might want to layer on, technical depth and, specifications and how, integrations work, all of that. But I think general marketing, I think it's always great. And this is probably why people use analogies like, we are the Uber of X, or, the this of this, because it just gives a good data point or framework for people to be like, okay, I can actually start to understand like what this is, right? So instead of explaining like what Applied Intuition does or Chaos Industries does, and it is like pretty technical, and you could probably do a whole 30-minute to an hour just to explain what the technology is doing. But instead, if you can kind of just explain it out in common ways, such as like for Applied Intuition, we provide the software that Waymo would use to kind of test their vehicles, but instead of paying billions of dollars, investing many years into it, you can just go with our software. So that similar kind of vein. I think having that framework, everyone knows Waymo, everyone knows what they do in terms of autonomous vehicles, and now they know that you provide the software for them to build that kind of autonomous infrastructure. And so I think, again, just going back to that language that you speak, and at the end of the day, bringing it down a level and just saying like you and I kind of chatting, that kind of language, I think is the way to make the brand feel more human, instead of talking about all these like technical things. That also could be, on the flip side, that also could be your brand, right? Your brand could be a little bit more on the technical sci-fi things, and you can lean into it a little bit more, but it's just an element. And at the end of the day, you still need to kind of speak human, because everyone at the end of the day is human, and we're all consumers of information.
That's exactly right. I love that you said speak human. That's our motto here. And we believe...
That wasn't planned, by the way, either.
I know, no, I like that. That's actually our motto, because we don't do B2B or B2C, we do B2H, business to humans. And we believe the more tech you are, the more human you need to behave. And I almost have a joke where, my mom should be able to understand the ad, right? So we don't lean into acronyms. We don't do all the kind of cliche things. We really try to distill out all of that and get to the core and the essence of what it is our brands do with our clients.
I've had to run through that test so many times, because I've been at many companies now, and every time I join, you come in, my mom's like, "Oh, what do you do?" I was like, well, here it is. Like, here's my actually like test for how I can actually do like a quick elevator pitch. And that'll maybe flow into the messaging at some point.
Exactly. Excellent. We're on the same page. Okay, let's talk about the next frontier. If marketing is heading into an era of AI-generated everything, where do you think the human marketer still wins? It's going to be hard for you. I know you're a data guy. Humans gotta win, Jason. Help me out.
So actually, weirdly enough, I may or may not be in the minority here, but I still think that in this field, the human marketer still wins in most ways, I would say. I would guess at that. And I mean, one example is like, would AI actually be able to have like a thoughtful, very human conversation like we are right now? They'll probably get there, maybe, as the models kind of keep learning. But at the end of the day, it's probably still going to be very like, formulaic and just kind of like, transactional, right? So you're not going to have those like slip ups and those like natural things. And sometimes those natural things are also very endearing as to why marketing is the way it is, right? It's not necessarily 100% perfect, and it's not just a bunch of data aggregated and spit out in an output, right? So, and I've also personally generated or used some AI tools to generate some images, and then they're not exactly there yet, right? So I think even on the design side too, there are things that humans can do, and it's just the human brain working, that creativity kind of spinning, which I still think the human marketer wins hands down. The one thing that I see where AI wins all the time is speed, though, because I mean, it is just so much faster, right? You're just aggregating thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of data points in like split seconds. And so that being said, I'm obviously a firm believer in the power of AI to just enhance what we do. And but that's a key word, right? It's enhance. It's not necessarily like a replace. I remember when AI was first just going crazy. People were like, oh, marketers' jobs are going to be like replaced, and I was like, I don't think so. Not yet. I think it'll help us, and we definitely need to harness kind of the capabilities of it. Like, you accelerate content creation, you boost your productivity. There's so many ways to use it to just make what we do easier, and we can focus on things like the creative and not have to worry necessarily about other things, right? Like things like writer's block. Shouldn't really exist anymore, because you can actually just drop in a draft, right? If you really are feeling that block. Or like if you really messed up a video shoot, but it costs like thousands of dollars to put together the crew, you can somewhat patch it up pretty elegantly. Like maybe it's still kind of noticeable, but there are just ways that AI can help us a lot more. Sure. But at the end of the day, I think it's still, human marketer kind of wins.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. When I think about it, AI is backwards looking. And a bunch of marketers say in cybersecurity that use AI, right, for creativity, they all tend to germinate their ideas from the same insight, right? So it consequently all starts to feel the same if it's AI generated, messaging direction wise or even brand wise. And I think AI is incredible, and I think it is a tool. But I think if we want to get the home runs, that we have to rely on something with a soul, right? I don't think you get got milk from AI. You know what I mean? Right. Something that's going to be so powerful and affect culture. I think you get a lot of solid base hits. Don't get me wrong with my baseball analogy, but I still think it takes somebody with a soul to come.
And we've talked about that so much, right? It's like how a lot of marketing nowadays, especially within industries, end up being kind of the same, right? Everyone's kind of looking to each other. Everyone probably puts similar prompts into AI. I think there are also industries that like you might be a little bit hesitant to use AI, at least at this time, right? I'm sure they're going to be building more controls and regulations and more kind of checks there. But like if there is like a confidential launch, like I can't use it, right? I still have to use the human mind. I still have to be very careful about what I input into AI. And I think there will always be that hesitation. There always was that hesitation also, even now, for autonomous vehicles, right? Even though it's proven, it's out on the streets, they're driving around in San Francisco, there still is kind of that hesitation and that risk. So I think until then too, and maybe not until forever, because there's always going to be very sensitive things, especially if you work in an industry like defense or government. There is always just going to be that kind of block there too.
Yeah. Okay, Jason, it's now the most exciting time of the day.
The lightning questions.
This is the lightning round that all my follower tell me is their favorite. Hi, Mom.
Awesome.
It is the lightning round. So again, first thing that comes to your mind, we're just going to power right through these, Jason. What's one marketing buzzword you'd exile to the moon forever?
There's so many, but the top is probably omnichannel marketing, which is super redundant. All marketing should be omnichannel, so it's like you don't say that anymore. Just say marketing.
Excellent. If Chaos Industries had a theme song, what would it be?
And going back to that question in terms of how subjective soundtracks are, but pure coincidence. But there's a song or audio track on artlist.io called Forged in Chaos. It's literally the perfect soundtrack for Chaos Industries. Like, it starts off a bit mysterious. It's a good build, has like hype near the end, and there's like this like subtle like ticking sound that is really in line with our like Chaos Industries creates time messaging. It's perfect.
Is this techno? Is it rock? What is it?
It's a little bit of both. I would say it's a little bit more on the electronic side, but there is like some maybe rock influence to it.
Okay.
It's just really dramatic, really mysterious. It has that kind of mystique. I think it was just perfect. We actually used it in one of our most recent videos.
Beautiful. More terrifying, a blank Google Doc or a meeting titled Q4 alignment session?
100% sure, 100% certain it was the Q4 alignment session. I think Google Doc to me is just an open canvas, right? You can do what you want with it. You can put a strategy doc. You can put together a very well-organized plan. I think alignment sessions aren't the worst, to be honest, but I think one that's not done well is just, time wasted. So that's probably the more terrifying.
Okay, what's a campaign you wish you'd done, which is just pure envy marketing?
I think the OCD person in me would talk about that Coinbase QR code.
On the Super Bowl?
That ran? Yeah, I think we all know it, right? It was just this like very visceral moment in all of our lives when we saw that. Maybe not like kids nowadays, but like back in the day with a DVD. And that was just like it was taking advantage of this like pop culture moment in time. Obviously, it was crazy time for all of us, but it was just a very like, refreshing thing. They really knew how to get OCD people like me kind of going in terms of it bouncing. And I think it crashed their website or something like that because there's just so many people.
I've been promoting this for a long time. I was on a team that started one of the first big national interactive ad agencies here in San Francisco. And Sun Microsystems was our client. We were launching the big .com campaign. And we tested all kinds of strategies. And what we learned very quickly was the more intrigue we could create, the more interest there was. Like the less messaging, the more creative intrigue, hands down, clobbered, very specific full messaging in our creativity. So that was pure intrigue to me. What the hell is that QR code bouncing around on the screen? Because it moved around like the pong ball, right, from the video.
Like, should I even scan this? Like, what if it's a virus or something?
Totally.
You never know. But yeah, it makes you question, like, should companies come out of stealth? Like the mystery and the intrigue sometimes actually lends itself pretty well.
It's a big strategy.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's your go-to cleaning up the deck at 2 a.m. snack?
Hopefully I'm not cleaning up decks at 2 a.m. Hopefully
it happens. What's the snack?
It's always popcorn, even though popcorn's a little bit controversial because you got to use your fingers and you're going to dirty up your keyboard. So sometimes I just eat it with a spoon, which is kind of weird. But
no, dude, hold on. Wait a second. Back up. Popcorn with a spoon?
So hear me out. Like, I obviously want to keep my keyboard clean, but I love popcorn. So that's at least I'm not using chopsticks. That'd be even weird.
Okay, fair enough. But it might be a little more impressive.
Yeah.
Okay. First job ever. And what did it secretly teach you about marketing?
Is this first job just like paying job or like an internship or something like that? I think it would be Pacific Sunwear, the clothing brand. I was just like they called it, and it was great positioning on their part. It was brand representative. So basically you're like a floor sales rep. And I honestly thought it was a great intro to just marketing, right? Like you have to like know your customer. Like as soon as they walk in the door, you kind of, think through like what they might want and you approach them, having that empathy, having that kind of building that connection, then basically trying to sell them certain products that you think might make them happy. And so I think it was a pretty interesting start. I remember it was during a time where oil prices or gas prices were really high though. And so I was making probably less than I was putting out in terms of cash flow for gas, but still worth it in my opinion, just as a kind of like a first entry into the working life, I guess.
I got it. My first job, and it's no coincidence that I'm working in advertising, was I cleaned horse stalls.
Oh yeah. Nice.
All right, what's one hill you'll die on when it comes to branding?
Probably that great branding starts with great products. I feel like you can come up with a great brand, but I think if you don't have products to kind of back it up, then you don't have much of a company, or you don't have much to kind of sell, right? And actually that might work against you if you sell a great brand without great products, because then people will expect the world and just end up being disappointed. So it might be the product marketer in me, but great brands start with great products for sure.
That's 100% true. I heard a great quote, and it was that nothing kills a bad product faster than great marketing. Right?
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. It's always in the back of our minds too.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so if your marketing style were a movie, what would the title be?
I'm going to cheat a little bit because this was part of your cold outreach to me, but honestly, Iron Man. I think there's just so many different aspects. Have different things in my tool belt, and I think it's just having that kind of like all-purpose, and also thinking through like creative ways, tech ways, understanding kind of the product. Like all of that is very Iron Man, and who wouldn't want to be?
Totally. Tony Stark was awesome. I mean, come on, what a superhero already.
Yeah.
Okay,
Inspiration.
you can hire one of these as your creative director: ChatGPT, Don Draper, or your own mother. Who gets the gig?
So that's a difficult one. Definitely not my mom. Love her, but she blindly likes the brands that she likes based on her own developed and mostly biased perception, and she will stubbornly stick to them. So pretty limited creativity from that perspective, so probably not. Admittedly, I have not watched Mad Men, but I do know the character Don Draper. From what I know of that character, maybe not the most authentic, and I honestly think, as a creative director and in any work in general, like you need to have that kind of authenticity. Probably not. I know I just railed on AI and how it won't take over marketing.
Yeah. But you're hiring.
But I guess from process of elimination, I'd probably have to go with ChatGPT. Or if I just choose an option 4, like, I don't know, maybe like a wild card, like
Who's the wild card?
Charles Ames or something, like who developed the Ames chair. I always
admired. One of my favorite chairs, and still kind of uncomfortable.
Still kind of uncomfortable, but I think the style is just very minimalist, clean. And he was like a pioneer of his time. Well,
totally.
Charles and Ray Ames, obviously.
Yeah, I loved having it in the living room, but I never liked to sit in it.
Oh, yeah? I still don't have one. I aspired to get one.
No, you don't need one. Go get a comfy sofa. Okay, finish this sentence. Marketing is just organized blank.
This is also cheating, but I'm just going to go with chaos. Like we talked about in the first question. I know I wanted to avoid using that word as possible, but I think it is, right? It is like there is a beauty in the chaos, but you need to harness it, you need to organize it. And if you organize it and prepare for it, that's where, creative can take over and you can come up with really cool outcomes and, great outcomes for the company. But sometimes it is a little bit chaotic.
Jason, that is the last of my questions. I want to thank you so much for joining us on Marketing Mischief and Mayhem. You've been a wonderful guest, and I'm sure all our listener will love it. So, hi, Mom. Again, hi, Mom. Thank you so much for joining us. I've really enjoyed my time with you, Jason. And once again, thanks for taking a flyer with us.
Thanks for having me.